Hello, this is Paul. This is the second video here in the series of Jeremiah chapter 5, where I started in video 1 discussing a dream that I had related to chapter 5 and verse 29. The dream that I had was probably about, somewhere around 2017. Today we're in 2025, okay? The dream was posing a question. And the question simply was stated in Spanish, repuesta, which means answer. What's your answer? And then I looked in Jeremiah 5:29, and like I mentioned before, Lord and behold, it was a question that was asked, which God is asking here, should I not visit for these things, said the Lord, shall not my soul be avenged on such a nation as this? Okay, I don't know if you guys can see that in the video, but anyways. Let's see, I'll try to get this lined up. Okay, so anyways, we're going to go ahead and start with, like I mentioned before, the first video was, I'm going to start with Jeremiah 5 verse 1. And I'm going to read it, and then afterwards I'm going to go ahead and discuss some things, some aspects of this particular verse in chapter 5. Run ye to and fro through the streets of Jerusalem, and see now, and know, and seek in the broad places thereof, if you can find a man, if there be any that executed judgment, that seeketh the truth, and I will pardon it. Okay, so first thing is, let's just kind of, before we go on here, let's talk about what's happening here. Basically, it's saying, it's prompting for anyone to go to the broad places of Jerusalem and see if they can find a man that is just and that is a seeker of the truth. And if you can find that one man, God says he will pardon that city back then, right? Now, let's look at the word ye, Y-E. Now, I want to show you some of my notes in case you want to just take a screenshot or something. But ye is the plural form of thou. And what does thou mean? You. Since it's a plural form of you, it means you all. So in this case, what it's saying here, it's saying run you all to and from, right? To and fro. Now, another word we can clarify is the word broad. This is a word that has multiple meanings, but in this particular case, from the context, we know it has to do with something wide, large, right? So these are all the different, I guess would be, if it's thesaurus, or if you had to look at the synonyms of it, it means large, gross, wide, and side to side, wide, extensive, vast. Let's see if I can read my notes here better. Large, all of this is the word broad, open, comprehensive. Here, I'm going to use it in a sentence. Well, you wrote that law. When you wrote that law, it applies quite broadly. Or that's too broad. What that means is you're not being specific enough. Okay. Gross doesn't mean like gross. That's terrible. I don't want to eat that. Gross means sort of like average, or it's like, for the most part. It's not saying specific, okay? It's another way of saying, not specific. Extensive, vast. So what God wants you to do is to go to the broad places in Jerusalem where you find most of the people, right? That doesn't mean like, okay, where's the wide places? No, it just means we find most of the people, and then you're going to look for any one person that is a just person, that's a seeker of truth. Okay. And then what happens? If you do find that person, God will pardon Jerusalem. What does that say about God? Basically, it's letting us know that our God is very merciful. Because if he's willing to forgive an entire city, now imagine if there's 100,000 people there. That means that of the 100,000 people, 99,000 are there, right? and most of them are evil. If you have one that's not, he's willing to pardon everybody else there. So if you think about it and you meditate on that, that tells you one message there, and God is merciful. Okay, now that's number one. Now let's look at some precepts for number one. Now I can, instead of going, I'm going to go and visit these real quick here, but I have them right down here. If you want to just take a screenshot, I'm going to go to Ezekiel 22:30, Genesis 18:23 and 26, Psalm 12:1, and Matthew 7:13. Let's go to Ezekiel 22:30. So Ezekiel 22:30. And do I have a marker here so I can come back to Jeremiah 5? Let's do that. Ezekiel 22:30. Here we go. 22:30. Right here. And I sought for a man among them that should make up the hedge and stand in the gap before me for the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found none. So now we have to figure out what hedge means. Okay, so hedge, it could be a fence around, and sometimes there's a hedge of protection that God puts around you. Or you have a fortification. Hedge could be a fortification. What's a fortification? It could be a wall fortification. It could be an assembly of men that are surrounding an object to protect it, or a person, right? So look what God says. And I sought for a man among them that should make up the hedge and stand in the gap before me for the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found none. Okay? So that right there is, and to be honest with you, I wanted to look a little bit more into that, but for sake of time, we're going to skip over to Genesis 18:23. Again, these are all the precepts or the connections to Jeremiah 5:1. Precepts is a word that's used for another word for law, and basically any of the verses that are directly connected or in parallel to the verse we just read in Jeremiah 5. So Genesis 18:23. So Genesis 18:23. And notice we're going over my 5-minute mark. We're at 7 minutes. I'm going to make this one quick and see if it still works out. All right. And Abraham drew near and said, "Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked?" So then he goes on, "Peradventure, there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou destroy?" Basically, those questions that Abraham was asking back then to God, guess what? God's like, listen, you find one. We're good. All right? Read that for yourself if you want to look at it a little bit more. Let's go to Psalm 12:1. Psalm 12:1. So think of, when you look at this and you think about it and you meditate on what God is saying, it should blow your mind. So we go to Psalm 12:1. Help, Lord, for the godly man ceaseth. I don't know if you can see it here or not. Here we go. Sorry. Help, Lord, for the godly man ceaseth. For the faithful fail from among the children of men. So there's not many. Okay? Now let's go to the next one, which was Matthew 7:13. And we're almost to the end of the precepts, and I'm just going to give you a shot of that before I cut the video out, so then you can look for these yourself. Matthew 7:13. So we're going to 5, 7. This is a vintage Bible here that was never used. A World Bible is one of my favorite Bibles. 7:13. And 7:13. Okay, so this one here relates to the word broad. So in 7:13, so this is one of those memory verses you want to know. Enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate. Notice it says, for wide is the gate and broad is the way. So you have, the gate is wide and the way is broad. That means that you have most of the people going to be found there that lead it to destruction. So you notice how they're using the word wide and broad. So most people are going to take the broad way, right? Because otherwise it wouldn't be the broad place. And many there be which go in thereat. So basically, I want to encourage you to ask yourself, that's our last precept until the next video. Am I in the broad place? Here, I give you something to think about. God's commandments, the fourth commandment in the King James Bible, it's about the Sabbath. 6 days thou shalt work. The seventh day should be for the Lord, for you to dedicate to the Lord and turn your foot away from doing your will and do instead God's will and focus on the spiritual things of listed in the Bible or required by God. How many people do that today? Are they in the broad places or are they in the narrow places? I would say the straight and narrow ones are the ones who follow the commandments. Most people are not following that Sabbath commandment. Okay, with that, I would say I'm going to try really hard not to be so lengthy next time. The next video is going to be on verse 2 and 3 of Jeremiah 5. This is Paul signing off for now. See you in the next video.